All right, I'm not going to look at that. Okay, welcome to Straight Up Book Club. Today we're going to be discussing Act 3 of Alex Michaelides The Fury. If you haven't listened to the last two episodes, that's where we discuss Acts 1 and 2. So go back and listen to those before you listen to this one, because otherwise you're going to be hearing a lot of spoilers. With that, this is a book club podcast. We're assuming that you're reading along with us. So obviously this is going to be including a lot of spoilers. So don't listen if you're not, caught up yet. Or listen to it if you want to use this as your way of reading the book. That's fine too.
But it's such a good book. You want to follow along, so
Agreed.
do it that way.
So before we get into it, Nat, tell me where you read this book and what you were drinking while you read it.
So I have two answers. So the first one is my regular answer. I read part of it on the couch with Still Writer's Tears, I think. And after that, I was in Tulum for a bit, so I read it on the beach in one of those like really chill bean bags by the water with some margaritas. So that was really nice too.
Ooh, margaritas. That sounds so nice. I did not have as an exciting a time reading it. I really just read it on the couch. It was such a short act, so I read it in like one sitting.
It was short,
Yeah. And this week I have been drinking a lot of wine, white wine, specifically like a nice Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. And gin has been kind of my go-to. So I've kind of strayed from the whiskey for this week for whatever reason. But yeah, lots of gin martinis and white wine.
Nice. Also, I got us some mezcal, and next episode, we should drink some mezcal as we talk about the next act.
I love that idea. Okay. I love mezcal. I'm here for it. Okay. Love that for us. Nat, did you want to kind of give us or start off on like a little bit of a summary as to what we've seen so far in this act?
Sounds good. So this act is so much backstory. Elliot goes into his background quite a bit. He talks about his sort of the dark aspects of his childhood. He'd alluded to that recently. I mean, in the earlier acts, he talked about how he had a really hard childhood, but we didn't know too much about that till this act. And that's basically exclusively what this act is, right? He just goes into great depth about it. So yeah, a big part of that is actually Barbara, right? So he talks about how he was struggling, he was unhoused for a little bit, and during that time, he had sort of left his family's house because there was some abuse there, it sounded like, and he just didn't want to be in that environment anymore. So he left, and I think he was in sort of a youth hostel for a little bit as well. But eventually, in that circumstance, he ended up meeting Barbara. And he talks about how she preyed on him in that time of his life, and but it was sort of an interesting mix of events because that's how he ended up living with her and getting to know her circle and eventually meeting Lana, right?
Yeah, actually, it's so funny that this chapter really dives so deep on Barbara's character. I don't think I was ever expecting there to be, and we kind of talked about that briefly, I think, in like the first act when we were covering that, like, is Barbara West, is she, a part of this really important line of characters, because he starts off introducing the characters as by order of importance, and he kind of sneaks Barbara in there. She doesn't really have her own chapter, but he is mentioned, I believe, between Lana and Kate. So a part of me is starting to wonder, now that we're kind of seeing so much about Barbara in this act, I am starting to wonder if she's actually more important than we were made to think, because so much time is spent on her character. Like, it goes deep into the abuse in the relationship between the two of them, the sort of sexual nature that's between the two of them. And it's so funny because we weren't sure at the beginning if it was like escort or escort, and it turns out he was an escort, not being escorting. I guess he also escorted her to the ball because they went to those parties together. So yeah, I guess he was a little bit of both. He was kind of her side piece a bit,
Mm-hmm.
both sexually, but then also as a bit of like arm candy, I think, and attending functions, because that's how he meets Lana. And I did kind of love how they go into Barbara's character in such a sinister way. Like, it talks about how, you know, she was a woman who liked to laugh a lot, but mostly at her own jokes. But also same, like, who's not like that? It said that they would never have met if she didn't have like a penchant for a gin and tonic at like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. She went there straight from a book signing.
Yes, that's true. And that's kind of how they meet at this bar. But yeah, what did you think of that? What did you think of that relationship between Elliot and Barbara, and how it was put on display for quite a bit of this act? Like, it spends a lot of time talking about their relationship in this portion.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting how he plays around with how important he wants us to think she is, because remember early on he was like, this is about their importance to this story, the story of the murder and the events that are unfolding on the island. But the more we find out, you know, Elliot is orchestrating a big part of it, right? And so Barbara, because she's played such a pivotal role in his life, arguably she's quite important in this story.
Yeah.
So you're right. Maybe he's kind of hedging early on about her importance, but she is pretty central to this story.
She's even more central because as the story unfolds, she takes him to this ball. It's not really a ball. I guess it's like a book event.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like Kate was in a play, and it was maybe before or after or something like that.
Yes. And Barbara was invited. I guess she was a part of this social circle. And she brings Elliot, and that's when he sees Lana. And he had already really liked Lana before because he had been obsessing about her in movies and the like.
Yeah.
And he sees her there, and he just has this moment of confidence where he decides he's gonna, you know, walk right up to her and befriend her. And it works. I can't remember if he invites her to go out the next day or if she invites him, but they essentially, I think it's the next day, go on a walk, go to a cafe, and they kind of spend the day together talking.
Yeah.
And this relationship progresses, and he professes his love to her, and Barbara somehow finds out, and she's the one who kind of steps in and keeps that relationship from going any further. And I think what she does, correct me if I'm wrong, but she essentially tells Lana all about Elliot's past and how he came from nothing, and how he spent some time as a sex worker in order to make ends meet, and, you know, really tries to paint Elliot in a bad light. And what happens is Lana doesn't really care.
Oh, but it's interesting because, like, she already knew, like, he'd confessed to her. Remember, he was like, they had this night, was it by the fire or something, where he kind of told her all about, he said something about, like, I shared the child with her or something like that, right? He shared his real past life with her, because he's playing a different role now, which we can get to as well. But she knew part of that. But what Barbara did was a layer above that, I think. At least, like, that was my reading of it, where she painted him as like, oh, he's out to get my money, and I think he's out to get yours as well.
That's right. I totally forgot about that element. She really tried to paint him in not just the bad light of his upbringing, but his current state.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And I don't remember exactly how this unfolds, but that happens. She tells Elliot, and they're like on the staircase, right? And he talks about how he just wanted to like throw her down the stairs.
Yeah.
And then she dies shortly after. And they don't talk about how she died, and I could be making this up, but in one of the earlier chapters, doesn't it say that Barbara fell down the stairs in like a drunken stupor and that's how she died? Or am I making this up?
That sounds familiar. And that stuck out to me too. I was wondering, like, did he end up doing something and he just left it out, as he tends to leave out things, you know? So maybe he gave us just enough to put those pieces together. But yeah, that's how he does it, right? A little bit at a time.
Yes, and then leaving holes that he then fills in later.
Yeah.
So I wonder what holes are going to be filled in later. But okay, so she dies. He doesn't say how. And then what happens? He goes back to Lana, and she's like, I'm marrying Jason.
Yeah. It's interesting. So like there was this like coldness like from Lana right after she found out, but I think after Barbara's death, um they start they regain their closeness sort of thing. So it's almost like Barbara needed to be out of the picture um for them to be close again. And so you're right, that theory of like, oh, maybe he had something to do with her death, or maybe he caused it, maybe he pushed her. It directly resulted on him getting what he wanted, which is being close to Lana again.
I feel like there's something here he's not telling us, whether it's, was Barbara painting her relationship with Elliot in a certain way to Lana, so Lana thought there was no chance between her and Elliot. Did you get the impression that Lana ever was in love with Elliot at all, or was it just a friendship for her? Because the way he paints it, it seems like it was just a matter of bad timing. When he was finally available to be with her, she had already moved on to be with Jason. And if only he had been with her earlier or had gotten rid of Barbara sooner, and I'm totally speculating that he's gotten rid of Barbara, but that's where my mind's going. He makes it seem like things would have worked out. But do you believe that to be true?
It's interesting because, like, yeah, I think Lana was had feelings for him in some way, and I think it was more than just friends because she alluded to that, right? I think she knew. I think she said something like, "Anyone can see that you're looking for love," and I think she wasn't ready. There's a line in there somewhere about how he wishes that he saw what she needed or what she was saying in that moment, but what she was saying is that she couldn't love him, but I don't think that meant that she couldn't be with him because they are spending a lot of time together. It doesn't seem like just friendly. She's clearly aware of his motivations, because she's questioning them and being really forward about it as well, right? Like she's letting him know her thoughts about it. So I think she was considering it, but maybe not as deeply as he was. What do you think?
I think that makes sense because her relationship with it's weird because her relationship with Jason is so different from her relationship with Elliot.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if maybe the type of person Lana is, she doesn't believe she should be with a person who's like Elliot, even though she has that friendship with him. Whereas the relationship with Jason is maybe a little bit more on less to maybe Jason's background's a little bit more appealing like to the masses than Elliot's. Like she doesn't have that friendship with Jason that she does with Elliot. So it's interesting that she's choosing Jason here. So he must have something that Elliot doesn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting that you said that because it's almost like he says early on that they're soulmates, right? And this act makes that really clear, like all the ways in which they are soulmates. But you find also that soulmates kind of repel each other in some way, and you recognize in other people what you hate about yourself or what you are trying to hide from the world about yourself. Ooh. Right? So maybe it was something like that as well.
That's such a like poignant thing because maybe Elliot brings out the side of her that she doesn't want to be brought out. Mm-hmm. That like they're honest with each other, they're most themselves around each other, but I don't think Lana wants to be herself. And I think we've kind of talked about that before. Like everyone wants to be Lana except for Lana. Yeah. And if Elliot is bringing that to the surface, then she's going to want to move on to someone who likes Lana for the Lana that the world sees, as opposed to the little part of herself that she's giving to Elliot.
That's so true. And also, she's sharing she hasn't told him that much, but he's told her a lot. So maybe there's an element of, the things that I've told you, I don't want other people to know. And when you're around people who know them, you're more likely to share them or accidentally spill them. But she does keep him around quite a bit, so maybe there's not too much there.
Maybe it's like that Rihanna meme where she's like, you didn't deserve to know me like that. Like that might be the case. I don't know. It seems like Elliot's okay with exposing his past for the most part. The past that he's willing to expose. I'm sure he has a lot of secrets. I don't think Lana is quite on that level.
Yeah, she's definitely playing a role and trying to keep up appearances. And like you said, like in the last episode, she has this mask on, right? Like a lot of celebrities do. So maybe there's some sort of maintenance there and she doesn't want to get too close to Elliot and share that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. And then the relationship that she has with Jason is obviously going to be a little bit more of that like relationship that I think the world is expecting. I think he's supposed to be this like good-looking, suave, manly man. At least that's the way he tries to paint
Jason?
himself. Yeah.
Mm.
So I think I get the impression that, Elliot's a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more reserved. He's a creative. So in my head, I'm picturing him versus Jason, and the relationship that the world is expecting, it is not Lana and Elliot by any means whatsoever.
Mm. That's a good point. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. That kind of brought me to what were we going to say?
No. I have a feeling it's what you were about to say.
I was going to switch gears to the bit about Elliot sort of directing and kind of muddying the distinction between real life and theater. The theater is his kind of work life, and now he's trying to direct the events that take place on the island to eventually lead in Jason's death. Like that is what we're learning this. I was gonna say this season. This
it feels like a season. It feels like an HBO show.
It does. I want it to be. Let's make that. Yeah, it feels like he wanted Jason's death to be the end result, but something went really awry. Like that's not where we ended up. There's so many things I want to talk about. I was just gonna say we even know who's actually dead right now? But
no, we don't. It's so funny, and this is a big thing that I wanted to talk about, but as the act unfolds, you see at the end that Lana comes to. She's perfectly fine. This whole death seems to be something that was faked.
Yeah.
But we know that a death occurs on the island.
Yes, we know that.
So whose is it?
Yeah, we also know that she's dead now. Well, when he's writing the book, she's dead.
But do we? Because I went back and that first chapter after he talks about how she's gone.
Yeah.
He talks about, that whole parallel between heaven and hell. Or sorry.
Yeah.
That parallel between how hell is the absence of God. He's in hell because he's absent from Lana. She's gone. If I'm reading that from the mindset that she doesn't want anything to do with him anymore and is estranged from him, that passage also makes sense.
That's true.
Mind you, is there another part that says that she's dead? And I've forgotten.
I went back to and I tried to look for one. I couldn't find one, but I was kind of reading between the lines of he's referring to her in the past tense. And there's some parts where it's like, oh, she used to be married to Jason, so fine, that could just be they're not married anymore. But yeah, she used to live in London. There were lots of past tense phrases that seem to stick out more so than she just doesn't do these things anymore, and this is just not her life anymore. So I was wondering it might be the case that it wasn't on the island. This book could be Elliot could be writing this way later. So, maybe she dies 10 years later and then he writes the book. So that there's that possibility too.
Also possible that she dies on the island, but not in that moment. Yeah. Does chaos ensue in the next act? And, Jason dies, Agatha dies, Lana dies. It's hard to say until we get there. But
yeah,
I do think that there's going to be something really massive to happen in regards to someone's death.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to that shawl. They haven't brought up the red shawl since the moment that they said that her body was wrapped in it, or that it was covering her. Where is the shawl in these newer moments? Is it does Kate end up dying? Where did that come from? I don't know.
That's a good point. Also, in this act, he says pretty overtly, he's Kate is actually inherently a good person. Hopefully I've made that clear, or I've bungled it. And that stuck out to me. I was yeah, you have bungled it, because you made it sound like she's a horrible person throughout. She's doing horrible things. She's cheating on one of her best friends, if not her best friend, Can
we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
If you don't mind. The the cheating part, because that also takes up a good chunk of the act when Elliot's following Jason and Kate, and he talks about their motivation, and he goes back to the Valentine Levy, I think it was, who says like a character's motivation is to remove pain, and he specifically says that Jason's motivation is probably like was it revenge or something?
Yes. Well, it was he wanted to crush her, right? It was an act of hatred, not love. Yeah, it was revenge.
Towards Lana? Mm-hmm. What was he so angry about? Did I miss something?
She was more powerful, and he was a man that wanted to be powerful, and he couldn't be with her. So, yeah, his motivation was to remove pain. But then the second layer, I guess, is revenge. I was just going to ask you, like, what do you think about Elliot sort of, I'm seeing it as sort of like bravado, or thinking that he's smarter than everyone in this scenario, because he seems to think that he can put in place like a series of events that lead towards Jason's death, but he leaves no room for people acting a way that he hasn't anticipated. You know, he's just like, this is what's gonna happen. But it doesn't go that way.
Yeah, Elliot's really starting to annoy me. I mean, I feel like he's been annoying since the beginning. Yeah. In a compelling way, you know. I don't mean like, I don't think the writing is bad. Like I love a character that I hate, if that makes sense. Yeah, like I really love like a villain's perspective. And I do think Elliot is being revealed to be a villain. He's trying to orchestrate everything that's happening in this story. He really is playing the role of author here. Like he's kind of author or director, however you want to put it, but like he's not just a narrator anymore. He's not just articulating the unfolding of events. He's trying to control them at this point. And you're right, he's not giving room for people to kind of have their own ways, which is making me wonder like how much of this is true within this fiction book. Like how much of this is true in this world here? I really don't know. I'm starting to wonder that he is painting his own narrative that's completely different from what's actually happening in these events. I'm not sure. What do you think about that?
That's true. I was also sort of seeing it as some form of delusion, right? That I feel like he has a lot of trauma. And I feel like maybe part of it has resulted in him trying to outsmart everyone, with, you know, kind of playing this role of who he is and playing a role of who he wants to be in society as well. So I think part of that is you have to anticipate everyone's actions and words and what's going to happen next, and kind of play chess in a way. But maybe he's just been doing it so long that he's kind of delusional about how accurately he can do that.
Yeah, I think the whole playing chess is a really interesting comparison. It is what it feels like. And you had me thinking all the way back to the beginning of how he wanted things to play out and how they did. Like he wanted one, for them all to end up on the island together. He got that. He wanted Lana to find out about the affair between Jason and Kate. And I think he planted the earring. That was kind of the...
Oh, yeah, he did do that.
So he, you know, orchestrated that. That worked out. He wanted Barbara to be gone. Seems like he orchestrated that as well. It seems like whatever Elliot wants, Elliot gets, except for Lana so far. So he is playing chess, but he's not getting his queen, I guess, or whatever, however other way you want to analogize that. But yeah, he's really trying to control the scene in every single moment. I just wonder, like, how much longer can he keep that going for?
Yeah, not much longer, because someone dies.
And probably not Jason. Like, if it's Jason, then he did orchestrate everything to plan. If it's not Jason, he failed. If it's Jason and someone else, he probably failed.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about that moment where Agatha runs away, because he really highlights that, right? He's like, oh, that's when my whole plan kind of went off the wayside. So I'm trying to figure out like what happened there, you know?
Can you remind me how that went? Because that wasn't as like, that didn't, strike a chord with me as much, but I saw that in your notes as well. So this is when we think that Lana has died, or
Yeah, so Lana is kind of on the ground, and Agatha's still there. I feel like everyone else has kind of run off to, I think, see about the guns. Leo's running after Jason too. But Agatha's still there, and she's really, really distraught. But then Lana starts to move, and she starts to get up, and Elliot and Lana kind of, play it off like, oh no, it's just a joke. But Agatha's like really not having it. She's like really upset about it, and she sort of runs off into the woods in that state. And that's the moment that he calls out. And I'm just like wondering, like, how is Agatha involved? Like, what is going to happen and unfold here?
Okay, I do remember this now that you said it, and I actually took that as we now have guns aplenty on the island. Well, I guess they're missing. Some of them are missing, but it's like if anyone has access to a gun and they're on the hunt for a predator or someone who's killed Lana, and people are running around wild and on the island, like someone's gonna be targeted without meaning to be. Does that make sense? Like that's kind of how I saw it. But now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm wondering if it's something more than that. Like how does she ruin his plan by leaving the scene? Like, did he need everyone to be in certain places at a certain time? Which again just feels like he's the director of this play and the ruins are the stage and she's left the stage and he has no control over her. So
that's
I don't know.
Good point. Yeah.
What did you think? Sorry.
That might be it, right? Like, and his players have moved in a way that he hadn't anticipated. But then that leads me to think, like, where did he think Agatha would be and where did he think everyone else would be? Because did he plan this whole thing with them running after the guns? Because why didn't he say this bit earlier?
I feel like Jason's a predictable character. And I think it's safe to assume that someone like him, having seen his wife dead, would go to protect his family. I feel like that is something that Ellie just knew would happen. And if he saw Leo hiding them, then he would have known Leo would have gone after him. I feel like Kate is upset she's going after him. I feel like those three actions are very predictable in this moment.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe Agatha was the thing. Maybe he thought or predicted that she'd be so distraught that she wouldn't move or she'd want answers. It's hard to say. What was your gut reaction when you first read that?
Well, this is when I started to kind of try to look for things that, aren't as evident, maybe, that are more in the background. And we still haven't figured out, like, the book cover, right? So this is when I started to draw, like, connections there. So I'm wondering, my sort of maybe out there thesis here is that Agatha's had some sort of protection over Lana. And I'm basing that off of her grandmother. Like, we know she is a witch. And the crystal. And, yeah, the evil eye sort of thing that's happening. And I think that that's Lana in the middle of it. I only just realized that there was a face in the middle of that, like, circle in the evil eye. So, yeah, so I wonder if Agatha's just, like, really distraught and hurt and upset by this charade. I don't know, whatever. She might think, oh, this is such a shitty joke, and just her good her good vibes towards Lana are totally lifted.
That's interesting. I think that's an interesting thought. And then you also had me thinking about the evil eye, and I actually just found this out this last week, and it had nothing to do with the book. It was my sister had mentioned something about how my dad had been gifted an evil eye by his landlord, and it's gifting an evil eye is different based on where you're from. So his landlord, I believe, is Middle Eastern, and it's supposed to be like protection for you. But in Greece, if you give an evil eye, you're trying to put a curse on someone.
What?
Yeah.
I
Now,
didn't know that.
this is my very quick Google search because it was a fight between my sister and dad. My dad's like, no, 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 it's supposed to like mean something good. And my sister was like, no, dad, like that's bad. They shouldn't be giving you an evil eye. They're trying to put a curse on you. And I was like, I'll solve this. And went on Google. And yeah, it depends on, the person who's gifting it, what country they're from or what their culture is. And I think Greece is the only country where it's like, if you give an evil eye, it's supposed to be a curse as opposed to protection. So something to noodle on.
But then why would anyone give someone an evil eye? Because the recipient would know when you just give it back. I don't want this.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I guess it's like, yeah, you'd be like, I don't want it, or you'd hope that the person doesn't know, or I don't know, is it one of those, is it like being served where it's like if it shows up on your door, you're like, well, it's been gifted to you whether you wanted it or not. I really don't know.
Can't give it back.
I feel really bad if I've gotten any of this information wrong. This was a quick Google search to mitigate a disagreement between my dad and sister. But yeah, let us know if you know anything else. Morty's here. Morty had his teeth removed this week. So he's got a shaved paw and he's doing so well. He's got one front tooth left. Come on. He's on a wet food diet, so he's loving his life right now.
Why did he have to get it removed?
I think just like when cats get older, their teeth can get like diseases in them. So they do it as like a precautionary way, but they want to do it like preventatively, but also before they get too old because it's more dangerous to be under anesthesia the older a cat is. So, but he's doing so well. We're so proud of him. Say hi. Bit wheezy. His asthma's been acting up, but anyways.
You and me both, buddy.
Poor Nat went to Tulum and got an asthma flare up.
It's fine. That's why my voice is so fucked this week. It's really raspy.
You sound like you drink gin and tonics at 11 a.m.
Oh no.
Just kidding. I might have a gin and tonic after this. Hold the tonic. Just kidding. Not really.
One more thing I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
There's another novelist, right? Christopher Isherwood.
Oh yeah.
Did you look him up?
I actually didn't.
I didn't either. But this one was interesting because he talks about how when you're talking about your younger self, you can't be objective it's too subjective. So his method is to refer to your younger self as like in the third person, which is so interesting. Like these little like tidbits of information, like again, therapy thing is like, when you're supposed to think about yourself as a kid.
This is the second time he's brought up therapy too.
Yeah.
Because he brought it up earlier when he's talking about how his therapist tells him that kids who experience trauma see the world from the outside, which actually makes a lot of sense when it's talking about referring to yourself as a third person. Like it sounds like his therapy has brought him to see his own life from this sort of like omniscient viewpoint.
Ooh.
Which is very reflective on the fact that he is this narrator in this book where he's trying to orchestrate everything.
That's such an interesting like connection. I hadn't thought of that before. That's exactly like what he's doing. It's almost like, yeah, he's taken this tool and maybe he sort of warped it and he's applying it to his life now, not in a way for healing, but in a way
to manipulate.
Yeah, to manipulate and get what he wants now.
I wanted to just read a quote that I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
It's actually from Tennessee Williams, but he put it in the end, and it's kind of it feels like a little bit of a curiosity seed for like how big and explosive this is going to be. But he says, and he's quoting Tennessee Williams here, he says, "Don't be boring, baby. Do whatever it takes to keep the thing going. Blow up a bomb on stage if you have to, but don't be boring." And he's referring to like writing. So I think we're going to see some crazy things that we are not expecting unfold.
Yeah, it's going to be big and I'm excited. There's 2 more acts left after this, right?
Yes, and they're short.
They're pretty short. Yeah. I was even surprised by how short this one was.
I was
it flew
too.
by. It's like 50, 60 pages, something like that.
I read it all in like one sitting, I believe.
Same.
Maybe 2.
Yeah.
But we had a lot to talk about, so I'm not worried about there not being lots to talk about.
Yeah.
What do you think, Morty?
All right. Well, thanks for listening to us, and get caught up on the next act, and we'll see you next time, next Thursday.
Next Thursday. See you at book club.
Bye.
Bye.